Boy, the Okanagan's great, but waiting for that ferry is a pain. 2 hours in the Okanagan heat? Boy, it's enough to make you wish you could pass it up next year. What this place needs is a bridge. It is 1955, you know. Just think of the difference a bridge would make. You wouldn't have to wait for your freight. You wouldn't have to wait for gas. You wouldn't have to wait for your transporting your orchard produce. And you wouldn't have to hold your tourists hostage and make them stay downtown and buy expensive souvenirs from the local merchants. I mean, they'd probably be the only people against the idea. You know, in 45 years, you could do a TV program about what a difference the bridge made. You could call it Pioneers in Places. Welcome to Pioneers in Places. Mike Roberts with our storyteller for tonight. And I use that term all the time, Wayne Wilson, the curator of the Kelowna Museum. Our storyteller, our source, our resource for the story tonight is the building of the Okanagan Lake Floating Bridge. Now, we're at a time here when we're contemplating its removal, but if we contemplate the time before its building, it's a time of great fractiousness in the province of British Columbia, isn't it?
Well, I mean, yeah, let's go back and look at, this is post-World War II. There's this whole complexion of optimism that's rolling around. You know, consumerism is on the rise, tourist travel is on the rise. Really, you want to get access to resources to fill the needs of that really burgeoning consumerism. So how do you do that? BC's a pretty tough place to move around in. It's an engineering nightmare. And once you build the road, you know, there's an ongoing cost of bridges and all of those sorts of things. So you want to get access to that. You better have ready and reliable transportation. And at that time, it's a pretty rich and optimistic time for BC.
Now, 1948 sees the constructing of the Hope-Princeton Highway and much of Highway 97 as we know it today. So that obviously was going to lead to the next big obstacle.
That's right. The road, Highway 97 up and down the valley, I think was seen at that time as a pretty fair piece of transportation access. The bottleneck, of course, was the highway. Getting the Hope-Princeton in here in the late 40s, you know, you could look at it two ways. Either we're in Vancouver's backyard or they're in our backyard. And access to that huge market was going to mean an awful lot for the people in this valley, and not just for the agricultural resources, but the emerging tourism industry was wildly optimistic about just what that was going to do for the economy of the valley.
Now, people knew that this beautiful Eden existed. It just was darn hard to get here.
Sure, you've got the Kettle Valley Railway that you could get in. From the south, you've got to go through the United States and up north from Vesuvius, or you've got to go through Highway 1 up the Fraser Canyon. You know, it's a tough place to get to. And once you're here, you can't get to Penticton from Kelowna unless you go across the ferry.
And it's going to take you long waits, and we've got images of long waits.
Oh, yeah.
As you pointed out, there were plans to build highways instead of bridges, like the highway up the east side past Naramata.
Yeah, for decades previously, and we've got some great photos in the museum of the crews out, volunteer crews out trying to build the Naramata Road down the east side from Kelowna to Penticton. There were discussions about building a major highway from the west side of the lake, from West Bank north to Vernon as well. But roads in BC have always been a difficult and expensive proposition, and none of the governments of the day were interested in sponsoring that kind of infrastructure development.
Matter of fact, there's a kind of an interesting, though politically incorrect, quote from one of the ministers at the time.
Yeah, a minister these days wouldn't get away with this, but this is attributed to Phil Ghilardi, and it's in the commemorative edition of the Courier for the opening of the bridge, and it says, "At the same time, the Highway Department was reluctant to build one more mile of highway than absolutely necessary. One of the reasons was that highway costs are like a wife. It isn't the original cost, it is the upkeep.
So Phil Ghilardi may not get reelected today saying that kind of thing, but that was the vernacular of the time.
It was. But you know, the reference is that British Columbia, go back 100 years into when the railways or more were coming through. Terrible, terrible cost in lives and in money and materials to build it and to keep it going.
But obviously, once the 1948 highway is built through Allison Pass, the focus all comes right down to that little ferry crossing between West Bank and Kelowna.
And the government had put ferries on there, you know, beginning in the 1930s, and added, you know, ferry after ferry, until finally, in the 1950s, there were 3 of them running. In 1950, they put the last of the ferries on, and there was the Lequim and the Pandosy and the Lloyd Jones, moving these vehicles back and forth, and there was bottlenecks on a regular basis in all seasons. So it was really an untenable situation.
Now, if we think to this, it was a 10-year period from the opening of the Allison Pass highway to the completion of the floating bridge. What took so long, or was 10 years not a long time to have something this big planned?
You know, I don't think it was a long time. If you think about the engineering work that needs to be done, first off, the studies that have to be in place to find out what sort of technology is going to be put in place to do this. Originally, it was going to be a suspension bridge, this huge, or this rock causeway bridge. But the engineering studies showed, I think pretty quickly, that that the substrate from the lake there wouldn't carry a structure like that. So there's a lot of work has to be put in place. And the government of the day, though it was very optimistic, really didn't have an appetite for it until the social credit government came in and adopted a brand new and very strong approach to what has become known as roads to riches. And they saw, the social credit government in general and WAC Bennett in particular, saw roads and transportation as absolutely pivotal to the economic and industrial development of British Columbia.
If it couldn't be a suspension bridge, it had to be something else. And the technology for a floating bridge, although it sounds, you know, I mean, people have put logs across, you know, water bodies before. This is a technology that's been not attempted anywhere else in the world before.
Well, there were floating bridges already, but this was going to be the longest floating bridge in the British Commonwealth. And it was going to be right here in British Columbia, right here in Kelowna.
Take a break here, come back in a moment, because I guess something has to happen at this location. If you're going to have a mega project, what do you put in place? And we'll talk about that right after this break. Welcome back to Pioneers and Places. Mike Roberts with Wayne Wilson, the curator of the Kelowna Museum, talking about the building of the Kelowna Floating Bridge back in 1956, 57, 58. You know, we're talking about a second bridge or a replacement bridge now, and it seems the talk just goes on and on and on. I mean, was it as bad then?
You know, I think it happened really quickly. I think if you look at the dimensions of this, and think about it, this is a mega project of its day. The social credit government comes in 1952. By 55, I think it was, the bridge is announced. Construction starts in 1956. The bridge is open in 1958. I think this is pretty darn quick. You know, governments don't move that fast these days.
They're flying along.
They are.
And in order to build this bridge, we have to begin to, you called it a mega project, we begin to have to think about some kind of scale. Mm-hmm. This is the longest floating bridge in the British Commonwealth.
That's right.
And how is it going to be be up? Is it just like a floating liner or something else?
Well, it basically got a 2,100 foot boat anchored in the middle of the lake, and it's connected at each end. It's connected at the west end with this causeway, this rock causeway that sweeps down the hill, this beautiful new road. And at the east side, you've got this lift span.
And of course, that east end has to connect in with what was the little town of Kelowna at the time.
That's right. It wends its way through City Park and connects up with Harvey Avenue, which was kind of a backwatery little road. The main road, of course, came up Bernard Avenue. That was you know, sort of access into the ferries, and away you went that way.
So you had a whole infrastructure change that had to happen in town.
Yeah.
But I mean, how did you build this bridge? What are the components of this bridge?
Well, you've got two construction sites. One is the bridge itself, where we see it today. The second construction site is actually where they built two huge graving docks to build the pontoon sections.
These are like dry docks.
Exactly. They were, each pontoon section was about 200 feet long, 50 feet wide, about 15 feet deep, and you've got to build a dry dock to hold that. So of course it's got to be bigger than that. And they do that exactly. They dig this out, dredge it down to 17 to 19 feet below lake level. They put in a network of pumping points to draw the water out. And then they, with piles and timbers, they build these graving docks. And in March 1957, they start to pour the concrete for these 200-foot sections, and there are 10 of them that they have to build, and then two 50-foot pontoon sections at each end.
So they start pouring the concrete for these, and this means a floor, walls, and a roof, all of it contiguous, all of it, you know, and reinforced so that if you got a hole in it, it's not going to sink.
There's dozens of cells inside each pontoon. All of that has to be put in place. These things hold 1,100 to 1,200 yards of concrete. They weigh 2,500 tons each, yet they float. And you'll love this. This is an idea of scale. The concrete plant they had was built specifically for the site, and it poured a whole 2 yards at a crack. So they're, 2 and 3 shifts a day pouring concrete into these things at only 2 yards a pop.
How big was the workforce?
It varied anywhere from 150 to 200 people. And the bulk of them, skilled tradespeople.
They came from elsewhere. This wasn't a crew put together of local capabilities.
No, Kelowna didn't have that number of skilled people. And of course, you've got the construction companies. Swan Wooster in Vancouver is the engineering firm. You got Dominion Bridge. You've got a company itself set up in Kelowna here to do the actual construction, Kelowna Bridge Contracting, and they come in and consolidate their operations to put this in place with dozens, scores of really trained, highly trained guys coming in.
Contemplate this, within 2 years you get your infrastructure, your graving docks built, and all the pilings that had to go in to make the graving docks. You got your concrete plant built, you've got your accesses in east and west built, and you haven't even begun to start working on the metal raising structures and bridges.
These 80-foot towers that sit on these caissons at the west end of the bridge. This is going to be a lift span. Okanagan Lake is a navigable waterway. You have to be able to move lake traffic up and down. So the solution to that is you can't build a suspension bridge. So they've got this lift span, and these 80-foot towers raise this lift span with 425 horse motors. Really pretty dinky little motors, but it's all about balance. Engineers are pretty clever guys to do this.
Each one of these floating sections of the bridge are eventually going to be linked together into this 2,100-foot long piece, but they actually have to be anchored to the lake bottom too, so they have to create changing length cables and anchors.
Well, that's right. They're not links, actually. This is a continuous steel cable, zinc coated steel cable. There's 90 strands in it. I've got a section of it here. This is a commemorative piece that we got at the museum, July 19th, from the opening day. And there's your cross section of this, this steel cable. There are 24 of these anchors, and they were 32 feet by 20 feet. And actually, Anchor Park in Kelowna here at Allison Harvey Avenue, you can actually go and see one of those anchors. It's out on display. These were sunken down 20 feet into the lake bed. Jets were put down as the anchors were put down, and they were embedded right in the base of the lake. These anchors rise up to the sides of each pontoon, and through a receiving and saddle kind of mechanism provide some adjustment to the cables. Because of course this lake rises and falls 4 or 5 feet annually. You've got wave action, hydrostatic pressures. You've got to be able to adjust the bridge from time to time and those sorts of things. And it's these cables and the saddle assembly that allows the engineering crew to do that work.
Now, we've got a picture right here, and this is one of those great shots that shows all of that location where the graving docks go,
That's
and
right.
the concrete plant. And there are two barge sections there, CN and CP.
CN and CP. To the south was the CP dock, and to the north was the CN docks.
And from those graving docks were hauled out all of these precast concrete floats.
That's right, and joined together piece by piece until you got to the two end pieces, which were the shorter pontoons, and they had a little rise to them. Of course, you're going up on the east end. You've got the rise to the lift span, and at the west side, you've got that little rise to allow boats to pass through, and those are the last pontoon sections.
And there is that 2,100-foot long boat. That's the bridge deck floating right there.
That's right. You can still see the gaps in it.
Yet to be connected. Well, and it took how long from March of '57 till
July? Think about it. To actually build this bridge, you've only got just over a year, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. From the time they started actually pouring the concrete pontoons. No, certainly a lot of work went on ahead of time. They're building the causeway in from the east side. They're sinking 700 piles to stabilize the ground as you come onto the lift span. They've got that huge rock causeway to build. So there's a lot of balancing time and motion work that's going on here to make sure that construction comes together in a timely manner.
Yeah. And you have to remember too that the technology at the time was commensurately smaller. I mean, a big dump truck in those days might have had 3 yards.
Yeah.
And so
That's right.
it was at a furious pace. Going to take a break here, come back in a second to talk about the repercussions, the implications of now not having a bottleneck at Okanagan Lake. We'll do that in just a minute. Welcome back to Pioneers and Places. Mike Roberts with Wayne Wilson talking about the constructing of the floating bridge in Kelowna. Set the scene for me. It's July of 1958, British Columbia's centennial year.
It is. This is an incredibly rich time for the province, all over the province. There are centennial projects opening up everywhere, and of course, right here in the Okanagan Valley, we're part of it. We have here in this bridge the solution to a problem that has plagued the economy of this valley for 100 years at that time. And here we're opening it. Dignitaries were there. Princess Margaret was here to open the bridge. What a great opportunity for this setting in British Columbia to have Princess Margaret here opening this.
And you've got to remember that this is the hinterland. This hadn't received this kind of attention ever before.
No, it's certainly people knew of the Okanagan. They knew of the wonderful climate, the orchards, the kind of manicured landscape that is really a pretty wonderful bucolic setting. So it had its own kind of romance, but agricultural settings are often seen as being a bit backward and as you say, a hinterland. And we were about to change that in a real big way.
I like the concept that kids were involved. I see these pictures, and it's Boy Scouts who are lining the area to welcome Princess Margaret to do the job.
The curious thing about this is that some of the newspaper reports of the day were not very generous to whoever had been organizing some of these centennial celebrations, because they were all being hogged by the dignitaries. And in Kelowna here, they weren't going to have any part of it. And just prior to the opening of the bridge, about 4,000 students were given tickets to the best seats in the house.
What has occurred since then? This, it's the wrong analogy, opens the floodgates to development in the valley.
It does. It's really the final physical impediment. You think of the bridge of the lake as being a barrier. All of a sudden, the lake joins us now. It joins the whole valley. We are now seen today as the Okanagan urban region. We're not Kelowna, Vernon, Penticton, Peachland, Summerland anymore. This is the Okanagan urban region. We have 2 of them in the province, the Georgia Strait urban region and the Okanagan urban region. And it's that transportation link, ready and reliable transportation, that allowed, in the 1960s, the federal and provincial government to come in and say, why don't we put in an industrial development program called DREE, Department of Regional Economic Expansion, and Department of Regional Industrial Expansion. And as a result of that, you've got corporate investment in Western Star, West Mill Carpets, Boat
Walker.
Factory, Hiram Walker, all of those
Campion
companies.
Boats.
And if you think of it, you're one of those corporate executives. Are you going to invest in this area if you don't have regular and reliable transportation? Not a chance. And I think that the bridge is probably the most pivotal piece of development that really broadened the economic base of the Okanagan Valley. To that point, it had largely been an agricultural setting. Yeah. Now, tourism was much more viable. In the 1960s, you got the Rogers Pass opening, so we've got the Vancouver market. Now we've got the Alberta and Prairie market as well. It's a really pretty rich time.
It strikes me that there's all sorts of stuff still to do if we were to research that time. What was the immediate impact on the city of Kelowna? I mean, we had 150 people spending money like mad. How did the hotels change? How did the neighborhood kind of change even before it was open, and then the burgeoning that follows?
Yeah, I'm sure there's the kind of boom and bust kind of cycle where you've got this ramping up to this development, and these are highly paid, skilled tradespeople coming in, and they changed the complexion of the town, I would bet, for a while. And there's a piece of work for a sociologist down the road.
The Kelowna Museum has a great exhibit. Where did you get that remarkable model?
That model was actually built by Swan Wooster, the engineering company in Vancouver. You can see it's a cutaway section of the lake. You can see how the pontoons fit, how the anchors work, the rockers that are on the lift span section, because of course bridges have to move. If they don't move, they break. It's like airplane wings. They got to move, because if they don't, they break. So how do those rockers work? Sections of the cables, all those sorts of things.
Last question. What's going to happen to the 2,100-foot-long ship that is the Kelowna Floating Bridge when a new bridge is brought in? What do we do with a perfectly acceptable 2,100 feet of floating bridge?
I think it's a really curious conundrum, because in all of the material that I've ever seen and read in the press recently and listened to on the news, nobody's talking about the old bridge. They're talking about the new bridge, but what do you do with this bridge? It's certainly serviceable. It's got access, on East End and West End. What do you do with it? And transportation, vehicular transportation, is not going to go away. This valley is going to get much bigger, much more quickly. So we're going to need that bridge, I think. There's my prediction.
Wayne Wilson, thank you very much for bringing us the story of the Kelowna Floating Bridge. Thank you for being here.
You're most welcome.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Join us again next time for another story from the pages of Okanagan history on Pioneers and Places. We'll see you then.